This is Women Ending War, the podcast where you'll discover that there is another path, that peace is possible, and that the women here can lead the way. I'm Dr. Elana Stockman. I'm here with Eva Dalek, my co-host. Welcome. Eva, assalamu alaikum. I'm great. How are you?
I'm good. I'm very excited about today's topic. It's one that is very, very dear to my heart.
Motherhood.
Yes. And peace building. Yeah.
Peace building and motherhood.
Summarize my life. Actually.
Oh, yeah? Tell me more. What does that mean?
I think, my background is working in gender and conflict, and I worked for the UN and different international organizations for 20 years before I became a mother. And I thought I knew what gender means. But motherhood brought me to my knees. And I realized that a lot of the gender topic and gender issues that we're talking and discussing completely ignore the dimension of what motherhood brings to the identity of women, but also what aspect it brings in terms of point of view to the table. And I noticed by working, I remember when I came back from my maternity leave, I was working for the UN peacekeeping mission based in New York, and my colleague expected me after 3 months to go on a mission to Sudan. And I'm like, what would I do with my son? I'm breastfeeding. And she's like, oh, just leave him with the husband. And I'm like, wow, okay, we need to redefine gender, taking motherhood into consideration. And it's not just like giving them a small corner space to breastfeed. It's actually putting them in the center of what we're supposedly working on, which is peace building. So I'm really, really excited about your organizations and to hear more about what
our guests today.
Doing.
Yes, we have two guests today. Yes, I haven't introduced the guests yet. Hang on one second. Before we introduce our two amazing guests, both of whom talk a lot about motherhood and activism, I just wanted to share that I have this book. I've had this book on my shelf for like 20 years, easily, probably more. It's called The Politics of Motherhood, and it's a collection of essays of activist movements from all around the world in lots of different places, all of them coming from places of mother, including a lot of environmental activism around the world. We've all seen Erin Brockovich and all of that. There's also two chapters in here, one about Israeli women and one about Palestinian women. So, and the one about Israeli women mentions the Four Mothers movement. And we have here today, one of our guest speakers is one of the founders of the Four Mothers movement, Dr. Rachel Ben Dor. And she's a scholar and an author of a book documenting what the New York Times calls the most successful peace movement in Israel, which of course is the most successful because it achieved its goal. Its goal was to have Israel withdraw from Lebanon, and it eventually worked. It eventually happened, so that we call that a success. Tick off that box. That doesn't happen all the time. So we have Rachel. Rachel is from the Galilee, born and bred, and her whole family history is from the Galilee. We'll hear about her story. And we also have today Lama Abuarquob, who's a school teacher and a speaker and a guide, peace activist from Dura, right outside Hebron, Al-Khalil, in the West Bank. And she's also a dialogue facilitator with a group called Tomorrow's Women. Did I get that right? Tomorrow's Women?
Yep.
So let's get started. We're going to start with Lama. Hi, Lama. How are you?
I'm fine. And you?
Thank you for being here today. You've spent a lot of time working with groups, taking groups around, speaking to groups of kids, groups of women here and around the world. Could you tell us a little bit about that work, what you're trying to achieve and how?
Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to communicate with especially women on the other side. This is something that I have been doing for long now. For the binational groups, I have been doing this for more than 5 years now, lately with Tomorrow's Women for 3 years. My thought was always, my search was always about a certain category of people that we should address on the other side, we should talk to, which is the generations of tomorrow. Because if we if we to bring about the desirable change that we really need to see on the ground, then we should work on this years and years before it happens. So my first group was within counter organization with young men and women, young students from the States, Jewish students. And then I started talking to Israeli groups coming to Bethlehem. And then my dream became true when I joined Tomorrow's Women. They're running a very promising program of leadership based on compassionate listening first and on skills of leadership also. The experience was and still actually, especially after the war, very, very challenging. The group that we are bringing together is the alumni of the organization now, and we're trying to figure out a way together to heal first, to share, to heal, and then to start having a vision about the near future and the far future, how it is going to be. This is my dream actually since ever, to talk to people between 15 and 18, and the miraculous transformative process that the group went through and is going through this summer also is very heart opening, is very hopeful. And actually, one of the things that gave me the energy to wake up in the morning and start my life again after the 7th of October is doing what I'm doing. It started as a job, and now it's a mission.
It's a mission. What is your vision, actually? You talked about a vision for the future, for the near future, for the long-term future. What is your vision?
The vision is, of course, on the long run, I would say I would like to see the zone here, the area here, like 50 years ago, 45 years ago, before the first and the second Intifada, and before the seventh, where people used to have access to everywhere inside Israel, and Israelis had access to everywhere almost in Palestine. I would like to see that women assume leadership actually, because it's time to make difference. And I'm sorry, men have been running things for very long now, and it's not getting us anywhere. I think it's the time for women to assume real leadership and to make change. Why women in particular, and what to do to prepare women for the future? Why women? Because any human being driven by the basic instinct to protect their own beloved ones, their own children, their own siblings, is very motivated. It's a huge energy that can be used to prepare women for leadership in the future. Even if we don't get to the political level and we don't assume leadership politically, we can make the change. And I think Rahel knows this very well. When women started moving, started going out the streets, screaming, asking for their sons to come back home, they did something. They made a very big change on the political level. So empowering the agency, empowering women themselves, empowering organizations that work with women is very, very crucial to the future of this area. If we prepare, if a mother is prepared, if a mother is empowered, and if there is a way to talk to her about what's going on here and try to make a change, she's going to raise different children. If she's a teacher, she's going to teach or to use different approaches to educate children at schools. it's like the cell and the soul of the cell, the essence of this dynamic cell of life is the mother. This is why I think whatever we are doing now should be parallel. Two things go in parallel, like empowering women, empowering women organizations, and talking from the heart to the people between 15 and 18 years, people who are going to the army and they are going one day to be behind the gun, people who are going to universities and they are going to be one day easy target to extremists. So this is very crucial that we build bridges of communication between these two categories of people.
And in your work, do you see change? You know, when you work with groups, whether with mothers or with teenagers, do you see change happening?
Yes, I can definitely say that the transformation, the change that I saw during the process, which takes one whole year with a group, is miraculous.
Wow.
The change in, I wouldn't say we are trying to change people or to change opinions. We're just going to open windows for the people on the other side to have a different point of view about Palestinians, about West Bankers. The long program of compassionate listening, personal stories, visioning, gender issues, one whole year is very eye-opening to these women, and it gives them the courage actually to go forward, to go in public with what they think, because it's very, very risky, especially after the seventh. It's very risky for Israeli women and Palestinian women actually to go out to streets and to go public with their opinions. But what we are trying to do is to empower these women, to empower these young leaders, to feel supported by the skills they gain through the program and by the support that they get all the way, even after they leave the program, to try to widen the circle of the people who know what's going on on the other side, to widen the circle of the people who are willing to contribute to a change in the future of this area.
What are those risks you're talking about? That
First of all, let alone that I'm coming from a very conservative community like Hebron and Dura, I'm also coming from, I'm representing women actually, and there's always restrictions about and of how much women can do within their own communities. So for a Palestinian woman, for a West Banker especially, the challenges are first to go out to the society with what she thinks, what she wants to do, her vision, and then to get people to accept that she's a woman and she's able, she's capable of making a change. And then there are the social norms, there's the religion, there's the political views, there's the dominant political views for the time being, whether in West Bank, in Gaza, or in Israel as well. Women are very challenged, especially after the 7th, because one of the risks that we might take is just going out and talking about peacemaking or at least healing with binational groups. It will be very surprising. It will be very like, what are you trying to do? What are you doing? How do you know that these people you're doing this work with don't really support what the army is doing in Gaza? How do you know that one of these women has a son in Gaza, a soldier son, and he killed one of your family member in Gaza, for example? How can you even think about sitting around a table talking to Israeli women at this very difficult times?
So that's really hard, really painful. I totally get, what soldiers mean to Palestinians, especially Palestinians in the West Bank. I understand that, but it's also painful for me because the soldiers are our kids. The soldiers in Israel are my kids. All of Israel has to do the army. It's mandatory conscription. So the soldiers are everyone's kids. And not only that, they go when they're 18. They go when American kids are going to college. Our kids are going to the army. They're doing all this self-sacrifice. So for us, these are kids who we love, who we support, who we want the best for. They're, entering adulthood, and the world is sort of looking at them like they're monsters. And that's extraordinarily painful. So I get the situation, but it's really, really hard as a mother.
But this is, I would say, and I'm very sure of what I am saying, this is the minority. The majority of women, this is why we need to empower the women. The majority of women, what they care about is their sons and the well-being of their sons and their future. They don't see the war as the solution, the path, the approach. No. I see it in my friends, with my colleagues. I see it everywhere in my community.
Right.
Women are very eager to have a better, a safer space for their children in the future.
I also would say that as an Israeli, whose kids serve in the army, a lot of the women, I'd say most of the women in peace groups that I go to are also, our kids go to the army. This is something that we have zero control over. We have zero control over whether, these kinds of, first of all, it's mandatory conscription. And also, we have so little control over government policy and all of these things. And also, as parents, we don't always, especially parents of basically adults, adult kids, we don't really have control as much as we think we would like, or we would like to, over their belief systems and all of that. And it can be really painful. I mean, I could say this personally. It could be really painful to be in that personal dichotomy of the place where you have this, set of beliefs. I have a really very strong belief system, wanting to end the violence, and I am so appalled and upset about so much of what the government is doing, and doing it in my name. I'm a Jew and an Israeli and all of that, and this government is doing these terrible things in my name, and my kids are in this also. We're all in it, and it's really hard. I'm just saying it's really, really, really
Yeah.
hard. And so, and I've been in circles also where like Palestinian women, would say, oh, I can't sit here with women whose children are in the army. And I totally understand that. I really understand that. At the same time, it like just sort of, twists the knife for me, because it's like I feel trapped in the system myself. I also feel trapped, and I feel like I have no control over my kids, and I don't I yeah, so it's
Yeah,
really.
but still, it's very important how you take this discussion to you to my how I take this discussion, for example, within my family, within my extended family, and within my society.
So this can be very, very hard for mothers, because we love our kids first and foremost. And as a mother, I love my kids. I have my kids back. Their backs. Number one, no matter what. My job as a mother is to have my kids' backs. Everything else is a distant number two. But the thing is that I also, as a mother, bring certain ideas and values. And what happens when my ideas and values are not exactly the same as what my kids are doing? So if my ideas and values say, I want a ceasefire right now, I want the IDF to not be doing what it's doing right now, but my kids are part of the IDF, that is really complicated. And it could be interpreted as, God forbid, me not supporting my kids. I mean, I get that all the time. I get people saying to me, think about your kids, think about your son. I get that all the time. I tend to block people who say that to me, as if like they care about my kids more than I do, as if somehow for me calling for a ceasefire and saying that I don't want war, that means that I'm not supporting my kids. So I just want to make that clear. Like, number one, I support my kids. But also there are other complications, so for my kids, it might be like, oh, you don't understand, Ima. Like, I don't understand. I'm the only one in my family who's like not connected to the army. I've never done the army. I've never held a gun. Okay, so for my kids, it's like, oh, you're not in the system, so you don't really understand. But for me, I think to myself, I actually understand probably more because I'm not in the system, because I haven't been subjected to all of the socialization that happens in the army. So maybe I have to see things more clearly. I have this conversation with my daughter all the time. She's like, well, maybe you don't understand. I'm like, I think I do understand. Anyway, so this is complicated for a mother, and I'm living smack in the middle of this. I have no out. There's no way for me to not be in the middle of all this. And it's hard. But it's hard mostly because I love my kids, and my kids come first.
Like in one of the classes, the argument was, one of my students said that the Israeli can choose not to go to the army. They can just say no. My kids also at home, especially at the beginning of the war, I have 4 adults at home, and they used to tell me all the time, especially after the 7th, that mom, they have the choice. They have the choice not to go to the army, and even if they go, they have the choice how to do it.
Right.
And I would ask them this question:
Right.
if there is a Palestinian state and we are allowed to have a Palestinian army, and Palestine is under attack or under a threat, and you're summoned, you're called for the military service, would you go? And they immediately said, without hesitation, of course we go. Yes. And I said, it's the same on the other side.
Wow.
It's the call of duty on the other side. Regardless how I think about what's going on in Gaza, it's how you take the argument to the teenagers, how you take the argument to the youth in both Israel and Palestine.
Oh my God, Lama, first of all, I really want to say thank you so much for saying that. Thank you so much for understanding that.
I want to tell you a little bit about my discussion with my son about it. First of all, yes, you're right. We can find a way not to go to the army. And after, because of this government, many people like me who are Israeli patriots started even to think about that. Not paying tax.
So I get, Rachel, what you're saying about choice, that everybody has choices. But we really have to understand what choice means for Israeli kids facing army service. Because it is mandatory conscription, so there is, the issue of law. And even though theoretically somebody could choose not to do that and choose to go to prison, there are other issues besides just the issue of going to prison. Because in Israel and in Israeli culture and Israeli society, serving in the army comes with a lot of rewards, tangible and intangible rewards. The tangible rewards for going to the army have to do with money, status, power. People who go to the army do things like start high-tech companies or serve in the government. It's not an accident that almost all of our political leaders are men who've been generals or in elite units. Bibi Netanyahu is from Sayeret Matkal. Bennett was Sayeret Matkal. These are considered elite units. Bennett also had a career in high-tech. We have Gantz and we have Gallant. And those 4 men, by the way, are the ones who are the most likely to be the next prime minister or something like that, according to polls. So the government is run by people who come through the army system. People who come through the army system have those networks and they have the power, and they're considered the ones most worthy of leading. They're the ones who get the jobs. When people have to give in resumes for jobs in Israel, you put your army service and what unit you were in and what command you had. And people who are commanders are considered better employees. I mean, that is just life in Israel. That people who have army service are more likely to get investments. Excuse me. People who serve in the army are more likely to get investments. So there are some very tangible rewards to army service, things that are very important to everyday life and functioning in Israel. But there's also a whole level of intangible rewards, which has to do with a kind of respect within the culture that sees army service as a form of heroism. And the more heroic you are, the more self-sacrificing you are, the more giving you are, the more dedicated you're perceived to be, the higher your status. That's part of the reason why, when the war came and, tons of people are running to do army service, it has a lot to do with not only sort of a wanting to protect the country, which is, a noble thing in itself, by the way, but also has to do with this sort of we're being instilled into the idea that sacrifice is everything, and dedication to the collective is everything, and there are awards for that. People who do that also go on speaking tours and get the book deals and the book gigs. So so there's all of that. There's the tangibles, the intangibles, and the heroism and the sense of like sacrifice. I sacrificed for the team. I took one for the team. That's not to dismiss, by the way, that some of these issues are very real, and the sacrifices are often very real. I mean, in this war since October 7th, the fighters have really given their lives. They still continue to. There are lots of families struggling. In our family, my kids, my daughters, my sons-in-law, my son have done a lot. They've given up a lot. There's lots of stories about what people give up in the army and the real price that it has on families, and it's continuing to have a family and on families. And there's actually a possibility, I think, that some of that mystique is about to start cracking. I think it's already starting to crack. If you listen to Israeli music, for example, you can hear a lot of like pushing back at some of these old narratives about what makes a good life and what makes a heroic person. But I just think I'm trying to point out that when we talk about choice and we're saying, oh, people have the choice to not serve in the army, we have to understand what that choice entails. It entails giving up on all of these rewards and, tangible and intangible rewards. And also, by the way, what happens if you don't serve is, you get a certain lesser status. You get the dirty looks, and you get the, assumptions about what you are and what and that sounds little. Okay, all of these things sound little compared to issues of life and death, because the choice to serve means you're dealing with life and death. And so isn't that more important? Well, yes, obviously, but if you're being socialized into dehumanization of the other and all the things that the army does and all our, Israeli society does of dehumanizing Palestinians, so you have that on the one side, and then you have all of these rewards on the other side, that puts the question of choice into a different context, because then we really have to ask ourselves, okay, choice, yes, but what does that choice really mean, and what does it really entail?
The way for us to change something is maybe to find a more severe act to stop this killing, because we cannot continue sending our generation after generation to be killed, to be sacrificed in a war and kill others and continue like that. I didn't talk like that while I was when I founded the Four Mothers movement, Leave Lebanon in Peace, and I was also the chairperson, and this was not part of our discussion. And in fact, when my son was drafted to the army, he was raised with no guns and any army toys, and follow us in all the peace rallies we went to. And he was drafted and volunteered to go to an elite unit. And he's a nature boy. He's, as far as you can imagine, from a fighter. And then I asked him, why are you doing that? So the word he told me, it's my turn. You brought me up to be a contribute to my country. And at this time, my contribution is to go to the army. And then I realized, okay, so therefore we need to change our situation and to let them contribute to the world and to the countries in other ways, meaning we need to to change the policy, the security policy, that you don't solve conflicts by wars. And actually we started with we brought a law to the Knesset, to the Israeli parliament, that first solution would not be a war. Well, under this government that we will talk more about, it's not that it's an excuse, But under this government, of course, this kind of discussion is not realistic anymore, but we are going to change it. And to you, Elana, that says we have no choice, I believe that we always have a choice.
No, I understand that, Rachel. No, I totally understand what you're saying about the. First of all, we always have choices and things like that. But I think your first point was really, really important. That where your son said, "Look, you brought me up with a sense of duty to my people," and I did that too. I brought my kids up to be very loyal to the Jewish people, even though that loyalty has shifted. Those concepts have shifted in me over the past 30 years. But still, the kids. I feel like a lot of soldiers go to the army in Israel from what I think is a place of correct values. Not correct. I don't want to say correct is the wrong word, but a place of like values of service and duty and loyalty and
Service to the
protection.
motherland. I want to bring in the service to the motherland, which is the irony. I mean, like all this army and all this like work in conflict is always to defend the motherland. And when you think about that and you put this element of mother in the midst, it's like which mother would send her son on any side, not only in Israel, Palestine, but also I've seen it in the various conflict zones where I've been. Most mothers will not send their son and daughters to be killed or to kill. They would send them to find a solution. They would educate them. So it's not something exceptional that Israeli or Palestinian women are doing. It's like something that is common across our human race, because when you carry a child and you give birth to that child, your vision for its future is never, oh, he's going to grow up to be a soldier,
Right.
or she's going to be in the army and she's going to protect the land. And so I think this is really a key element that I've seen also in Burundi when we brought women, Hutu and Tutsi women in Burundi after the genocide in Rwanda. It was around the fact that they were mothers. And in many different conflict zones, when we bring women together, and the first common identity where they come together despite a lot of dividing issues is being a mother, is being a woman.
Yeah.
And I think this, when you focus on that, and I think also in the Bible, there's this story, I don't remember the details, but I just remember that two mothers are fighting over a child.
Oh yeah, the Solomon's baby.
And the King Solomon said, let me divide it. And the real mother is like, no, she can have it.
Right.
And so I think this is really a best example of showing, like, when we are faced with a dilemma, the mother would know what to choose. And as our previous guest said before, if women were at the table right now, at the negotiation table, the hostage deal we would have had a deal, and we would have ended this war long time ago.
So, Eva, it's so interesting to me because you and I have had different experiences of motherhood. Because you were just describing before how you were sick, you were working for 20 years before you became a mother. And for me, I became a mother when I was 23 years old. I got married when I was 21. I was very religious, and I came from a religious house. And for me, I feel like when I became a mother, I was still very much in the place of having been in my place of socialization, of all that motherland stuff, of all the rhetoric and the propaganda and all those ideas. I was 100% in it. I was like, rah, Jewish people, Israel, Zionism, and all of that. And it took me a process. It took me my own process of 10, 15 years, if not more, to unpack all of that and to be able to ask myself what I actually really believe in, what I actually want, and so I was raising my kids for a long time as an agent of that motherland thing, the very male created patriarchal view about what creates a good life and what it means to have honor and fighting and holding guns and things like that. And it took me a long time to learn how to question it and also to get the courage to question it. And so today, again, I participate in a lot of different, women's peace groups and stuff. And it's interesting to me that I find so many women there who are mothers of soldiers, and really struggling with this sort of duality of identity of like this, I believe in one thing, when my kids go and do it isn't, but also struggling with that idea that, I was also an agent of the state for a while, of the culture of the patriarchy. I was totally an agent of the patriarchy for a long time till I decided not to be. But it's not so simple, it's for women to hold on to that. But what I really wanted to say is that I think that today, since October 7th especially, I just want to say, since October 7th, there are at least half a dozen mothers groups that have started. A lot of them are mothers of soldiers. I wrote it down because I belong to some of them. There's a group called Ima Era, which is Awake Mother. There's Imahot Zoakot, which is Screaming Mothers. There's Imahot Neged Alimut, Women Against Violence. That actually started before October 7th. There's a group called Teda Kol Em, All Mothers Know, which is a religious group. There's Imahot Bachazit, which is Mothers on the Front, which is a group that is also of women, mothers of soldiers, but with a different kind of agenda. There's Horim Zoakim Omrim Dai. Actually, they recently combined. There's parents of soldiers screaming, enough. There's, and then there's a whole bunch of others. There's Mothers Leman, Imahot Leman Chatufim. And then there's the Forum 1325 that I'm also part of it. There's Cabinet Hanashim, the Women's Cabinet. I mean, that's an astounding number of organizations all about motherhood, all aimed at ending this war in one way or another and getting back the hostages and also creating some kind of peace agreement. I mean, that's more, Rachel, than there were 20 years ago when you started the Four Mothers movement. And so I'm sort of like looking at this, and I'm looking at myself in these places also because I feel like something's going on with me also the same way something's going on with all these women. We're in this like very real transition right now of trying to let go and release all of these things that we were socialized into and finding our own way to redefine motherhood and to redefine our relationships with our children and our relationships with the state, so it's, I don't know. It wasn't a case for me that, when I became a mother, I understood all of this because I absolutely did not. I absolutely did not understand any of this. Anyway, okay, yes.
We are from a kibbutz. It's a community that worship socialism and equality, and we raise our children to be, especially in our family, to be loyal to humankind, not necessarily if it's on a certain side, Jewish, Israeli, or so on, and to treat everyone equally. And these are, and live in peace. These are main values that we believe in. And this is how we're trying to raise our children. And therefore, the sense that he felt that he needs to contribute to society, and the only venue he felt he has at the age of 18 was to serve in the army because mandatory drafting and also, but also the sense of contribution in this way. It means that we shifted for our dream, and we have to fix it. Yeah, we have to fix the world to live in peace, right? But at least what I felt we have to start is to extinguish the fire in the north. And this is why I founded this movement, and it ended after very, very, very hard work, by the way, with the same prime minister at the beginning. And I wrote about it in this book, documented this protest that took 3.5 years and many, many casualties. And ended what they call in the newspaper success. But there is never a success after so many years. The only success I saw was that for 24 years, other than the months of 2006, the war of the summer of 2006, we had the most prosperous and quiet life we ever knew. And what we're experiencing now, it's the most horrible war I ever knew in all my life. My grandchildren are terrified about being under fire all the time. And we have to stop it.
I just want to say, I'm really proud of the way I raised my kids. Okay, I'm super proud of my kids. My kids are hardworking, dedicated, willing to give, really dedicated to their people, their families, to the Jewish people, to life. Okay, they're really I'm saying this like in this chapter on this episode on motherhood. I'm really proud of my kids. I'm really proud of how great my kids are. And not just my kids also, but I think like a lot of Israeli kids, you know, are instilled with this sense of protectiveness, of protecting family, protecting the people. And also since October 7th, many are, you know, terrified. In conversations that I have also, you know, with 20-somethings and 30-somethings, they're growing up with a whole different reality and very real fears, and also themselves becoming parents and what it means to them to be protecting their families and protect. So this is, you know, this is hard, and I just want to put that out there that, you know, I really have a lot of respect for my kids and for their contemporaries who are struggling with all of these issues. The problem, though, is that the problem is that in all these things is embedded language of us and them. You know, in all that army service and all that dedication to your tribe, to your people, to your collective, embedded in all that is an us and them thing, that tribalism, you know, which entails a certain dehumanization. And that dehumanization contributes to the ability for Israel to do all the things that we're doing right now. You know, it starts with that dehumanization. And so it's complicated because some of these things are intertwined. You know, the dedicated to the collective and the fear from October 7th, you know, is connected to all the, you know, enemyizing, you know, turning others into the enemy. And, you know, it's hard for kids in the army also to question it while they're in it. You know, again, I'm the outsider. It's easier for me to question than it is for kids who are still in it. I say kids, young adults, kids from the, you know, it's hard to question it when you're really deep in it. So that's also hard.
We are not, I don't feel that we are on two different sides. I feel that we are on the same side. And the way I see things today, very strongly, and I feel that I'm even talking like that. Whenever I'm talking, it's like our life. I'm fighting for life as a mother, as a human being, and I'm fighting for life. So let's talk about how to combine forces, and of the people who doesn't think that war is the solution and killing is the solution, and take it out of our world. That I'm a professor of philosophy of religion and canonical text. And actually, my doctorate dissertation, it's about women's leadership in patriarchal society, managing to bring their agenda, the social agenda, to the public sphere, not only work inside the house. And of course, I used a lot of the tactic women in ancient time used, because we still, although I don't feel that I'm so restricted in Israel, I feel very safe to go out and talk about everyone and everywhere, and even talk negatively, very forceful about our leaders. So I'm not afraid to do that. I know that when I was trying to work with women in Lebanon, they had a more difficult time doing so. And I guess and I know it in Gaza too. So this is what I would like to focus on now.
Okay.
I'm working with different groups. When I'm trying to recruit people to work with us, because we cannot do it alone. So I get so much rejection from people all around the world, and I'm so devastated about it. I said, there's no side. Yes, I'm an Israeli, but I'm trying to work with you, with everyone in the world that can help.
Right.
Don't take sides.
It's very hard. It's very hard to feel blamed. Yes. Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm agreeing with you.
I'm blaming anyone about it. I'm just talking about my difficulties at this point, to bring us together to work for life everywhere in the world, and especially in our region.
Thank you so much, Rachel. Thank you for sharing that. Lama, I'm sure you had a lot of thoughts also while I was talking and also while Rachel was talking, and I'd really love to hear your thoughts, reactions to any of it.
It's actually not the first time that I hear the or I feel the frustration in some of the things that my Israeli friends also say all the time about what's happening and about what we can do to change things on the ground. What's really important for me is that, and what we are doing actually with the groups that we facilitate is not to go back to history and not to try to blame or to judge or no, just try to deal with what's going on now. If we go back in time and we talk about 75 years of conflict, I would say 75 years of conflict with political interference, negotiations, wars, attacks, huge loss of beautiful souls on both sides. And look where we are today. If we are talking about the 7th in particular, actually one of the most hurting things that I heard from one of my friends who was screaming and saying that it's unbelievable what happened. They are animals. And I said, okay, what do you expect from people who have been caged, literally caged, for more than 20 years with 4 wars, with closed borders, with minimum things to live with? What do you expect? Of course they are animals now. Of course they will look like, or they will react like animals. So the thing now is how to move from the consequences of the 7th, the consequences of a long duration conflict, into something practical, what to do in order. It's not enough to get people together. What's next? We have been around tables for many years, politically, socially, on the public level, on the level of peace building organizations. And we ended up on the 7th killing each other in the ugliest ways ever.
Right.
I don't call it genocide. I don't call it massacre. I don't call it ethnic cleansing. I call it loss of human beings, loss of potentials, and a lot of grief, a lot of mourning, a lot of tragedy.
Wow, Lama, I just want to tell you how grateful I am that you say that, how grateful I am that you're pushing back against the use of some of this language of genocide and ethnic cleansing. I'm not saying, what did or didn't happen in that sense. I'm not saying whether or not it should be called genocide, but I am saying that the use of this language, the use of the word genocide, is very, very hard for Jews and Israeli and Jewish Israelis to digest. It's hard to hear. We hear the word genocide and we like, oh, what? Because we think Holocaust. Genocide means Holocaust. And that's it. And that is, sacred for most Jews. That was its thing. And don't compare anything to that. That's how Jews respond to the word genocide. And also it's like, well, how dare you even suggest that we are perpetrating a genocide when we are the penultimate victims of genocide? So it stops the conversation. The use of the word genocide stops the conversation. It stops many Jews from being able to engage any further. And then the whole conversation becomes, is it genocide or isn't it? How are we defining it? Are we defining it? Which goes into, did this happen? Did this happen? Are you lying? Are you not lying? Which we don't want to go there. Why? It distracts from all the work that we're trying to do here, which is to help people hear each other's life stories and help people empathize with one another's life stories. So Lama, I'm really grateful to you And wow, just wow that you're able to like get past your own also needs. Like, I understand why somebody who's like experienced the kinds of things that the Palestinians are experiencing right now, why there's a need to say, this is genocide, this is what's happening. And Lama, what you're saying is, hang on a second, let's find different language that helps us connect. And I'm just, wow, so grateful for that. So grateful and really in admiration of that process that it takes to get to that place. And one more thing that I want to say that I've noticed in this podcast with all the conversations we had. This is episode 10, okay? So we've already had quite a few of interesting conversations here. What I've discovered is that once we sit with another person's narrative without pushing back, without correcting, with just being with it, then we're able to get to the next bit. We're able to move to the next important bit, which is, okay, what do we do now? Which is what conflict resolution ultimately is about. If we're ever going to have peace here, if we're ever going to bring resolution to this bloodshed, we have to get past all of those arguments about, did this happen, did it happen, is it genocide, isn't genocide? Like, we can't get caught up in that quagmire of labels. Forget the labels. We need to just be in a place of acceptance. We understand that this is happening. Terrible things are happening. Terrible things are happening by you, and terrible things are happening by me. Okay, and we need to, whoever you is and whoever me is, we need to take responsibility and, accept our own roles here and figure out solutions, recognize one another's pain and trauma, and move to the place of solutions. And so not getting caught up on the labels and finding instead words that connect us, like grief and loss. We are all connected by grief and loss. We are connected by motherhood, by the desire to protect our children, by the desire to create a safe place for our children. We're connected by that. So finding those connecting words is where that's helpful. That's helpful because then we can move on to the next. And that's what I feel like has been happening in a lot of these podcast conversations is if we don't get, hung up on the labels, we're able to get to the hard work and the meaningful work of making change.
On both sides.
Right.
Now, if we are thinking about what to do next and to stop thinking about what happened since I don't know when, we should start by at least by healing, by finding ways to heal together. I lost my son like 50 days ago.
I'm so
He was
sorry, Lama.
17.
Lama,
He was 17 and he was sick. I lost him, and at the beginning I thought that grief is personal, is private. But if healing and grief takes place or happens among people together, like I heal with my kids. I come through these difficult times together with my sons and daughters, and not apart from them, as I thought at the beginning. They shouldn't see me grieving. They shouldn't see me crying. No, it's actually part of the healing process. The togetherness during healing. So what is the very important thing? What does it take to move people together? First, to heal together and not talk about anything, and then start talking about a future.
right.
Thank you, Lama. This is such a beautiful representation of what I believe is the heart of the conflict. Is actually how can we sit together in this loss and in this grief and tackle the psychology of this conflict. Very rarely do people tackle the psychology of the conflict, and that in here it's the essence of the existence of both people. Like the Palestinian and the Israeli are yearning of acknowledgement from the other for their right to exist on this land. Like at the essence of this is like, do we have the right to exist, to coexist on this land together? And I think what you're talking about is like the answer is yes. Let's acknowledge that we both can sit together in grief together
Right.
and stop this killing. And I think this is really an important element that you're bringing, and I'm really sorry for your loss. And thank you for coming here on the podcast in this difficult time.
Right. I want to add to that also, Eva, thank you so much for giving that word of grief, and Lama, I'm so, I can't, when we spoke the other day and you were telling me about this, and, I was so, I am so in awe of your strength and courage and, ability to stand up and, continue to make meaning. Um, I feel like also, grief takes a lot of forms. I feel like there are so many forms of grief right now. I mean, we're surrounded by bloodshed in Israel and Palestine. I mean, we're just every day, and even we don't even hear about it all the time, but there is like nonstop pain and trauma happening like right now as we speak. And we're just sunk in it. We're sunk in it. And I feel like also, from this place of motherhood, that I'm a participant in it also. If I don't stand up, if I don't go to all these protests and rallies and participate in all these ways, try to put a different voice out there, participating in it. I keep thinking about what you were saying before. I don't remember who said it. We were talking about choice. Do we have choices? Do I have choice? And I said, I feel like sometimes as a mother, I don't have a choice and stuff. And so I want to like go back to that for just 1 second. Is that I totally agree that in life we have choices, right? Um, but first of all, we can't make our kids choices for them, and so they make their own choices. But also, choice can be very complicated when you're stuck in a societal system that has a very particular agenda, such as your religion or your nation or your ideology and all those things that are, or our government that has a very particular reason to try to get you to believe a thing. And
I
so,
think that's what Rachel also spoke about,
yeah,
if I may, because she
yeah,
was the one who spoke about choice. And I think what I hear from you also, Rachel, is just this desire to be heard. Also, how on earth did we go from like to support a Palestinian state to become anti-Semitism? This is like the connection is like disconnected.
Right.
And I think that's what you're speaking about. Is like, yes, we want to support Palestinian state. We want to stop the war. This doesn't necessarily need to mean to become anti-Semitism. And as I said very often, is like people are riding the wave of Gaza to justify a grievance that were there before, but that now they're taking this opportunity to express it and use it as an excuse. And I think that's what you're speaking about. And you're talking towards this is not acceptable. And we need, as one front, we need to say no to that. As Palestinian, we need to say no to the anti-Semitism. As Palestinian, we need to say no to this violence. And as Israeli, we need to say no. As Israeli, we need to say no to what this government is doing, and which is exactly what you're saying here. So I also want to acknowledge that also in this conversation.
You have to go to look to the future, especially as a mother. You have to look for the well-being of the next generation and the generation after, especially when our leaders are consistently sending generation after generation to kill and be killed and cause a lot of destruction because of their lack of capability to do anything else, like any political process. Of course, it's the weakness of our leaders. What I was trying to do while I led this movement is to change the system, to change the security policy for the Galilee and so on. And I wrote about it, and also there is a website about For Mothers Rachel that I talk about it a lot, because I feel that the main problem now, other than the suffering and animosity and fear, a lot of fear between in both sides, and rightfully so, after all this agony. The key thing, in my opinion, and I think we are doing it, and also, Elana, to what you said, yes, we do have a choice. And what I did was a proof for that, and it's very difficult to change the government to kick them out. If it happened with Saddam Hussein and Ceausescu in Romania and other totalitarian, so we can do it. A big believer, and we can do it, especially as mothers and women. We have a very authentic voice, and people look at us as role models, as leading this peace camp. Although in my movement, we were families. I have to remind everyone, the foremothers' name was a name that we adopted based on the biblical text about the foremother in the Bible, Sarah, Rebecca, Leah, and Rachel. And what was astonishing for me, that generals, high-ranked generals, were released from the army and joined a movement that was tagged, identified as mothers. I was so proud about it. I said, we still have a hope. And actually we did. So I feel that
I want to talk to that for a second. I want to respond to that for a second. I think that's a really important point when we talk about the politics of motherhood. So it's really important to point out that motherhood is not necessarily literally motherhood. When we talk about the politics of motherhood, we're talking about motherhood as a sort of model for compassion, and care and thinking of everybody. It doesn't even have to be mothers. And also, so that's really, really important. I also want to point out that in this book, let's say The Politics of Motherhood, it's not just peace camps, by the way. It's also, motherhood has also been adopted by lots of other different kind of movements to the right also. So we should just be aware that motherhood can take us to other places as well. And also, I would also like to just point out as a caveat that it is difficult to talk sometimes about motherhood with assumptions that motherhood is the source of women's strength and compassion and all those things, because not all women are mothers, and women who aren't mothers still have a lot of value. Actually, this is actually happening in America right now that Kamala Harris is the presidential nominee, and one of the attacks she's getting from the right is, oh, she's not a mother, and therefore she doesn't have value. I mean, that's actually been on Fox News, oh, Kamala Harris isn't a mother, so she doesn't deserve to be president, because how could she understand things? So I really would like to just point out, hang on a second.
Like Deborah, the judge in the Bible.
Right,
it's the same thing.
Same thing, exactly. So, so I really wanted to point that also, that women have value even if they're not mothers, and that when we talk about mothers, and also to point out that not all mothers are compassionate. Not all mothers even have that. I mean, we take for granted, oh, if you're going to become a mother, then you're going to have all these qualities. But I would just also like to put the caveat out there that even that is not necessarily true. Being a mother doesn't necessarily automatically make you a certain type of person. Okay, so I just want to point out that, because you talked about the generals joining the mothers. So what we say when we talk here in this conversation about the politics of motherhood, we're talking about a very specific kind of value of motherhood as a lens for compassion. And so that motherhood as a lens for compassion is not literal. It's not literally motherhood. It's more like, I mean, I think it is probably literal for a lot of people. I think a lot of women do have a major transformation, once we become mothers. I mean, you become a mother and something happens to you and you see the world differently, for sure, like what Eva was saying at the very beginning. So there is a literal aspect to it, but I just want to point out as a caveat that it's not necessarily literal for all those reasons that I just put out there.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for bringing that up, Elana. And I think that's where Rachel, I'm assuming, was going with it, that it's not the movement, the For Mother wasn't just for mothers, but actually even generals and men. And I think that's also, if we draw the parallel with the Liberian woman movement, the strength of it is that it brought together men and women. And I think every single transformation movement, political and social movement, would have to engage the whole of society. So we're not here saying, let's just have women in power and drop the man or exclude the man. It's on the contrary. We need all part of society to create an equal and inclusive society. We need everybody.
Right.
And to create peace, we need everybody.
Is there something we can do in the political arena together from both sides? Again, it's not both sides. Even I'm trapped in this militant word, sides. From the same side of life to help children and grandchildren.
Right.
Do you think there's something you can see as possible?
I think Lama's doing it. Lama?
Yeah,
You're doing it.
Actually, what I have been doing for 3 years, and some other also Palestinian women, we have parallel Palestinian women movements. One in a refugee camp where it is very risky to do such work. It's just that what concerns me actually is the change. I don't know if it's a majority or not, but I was watching a documentary of BBC the other day, and it interviewed Palestinian and Israeli women and Palestinian women, and some part of it was in Gaza, some part of it was in a kibbutz near Gaza, and one shocking sentence that I hear for the first time, maybe from Israeli women, is "Ani rotsani kaman." And
Oh,
when I heard this
I want revenge.
sentence,
Mm.
yeah, I want revenge. When I heard this sentence, I was a little bit shocked, and I saw also another video of a mother driving her son to the military base, telling him, "Kill them all, children, men, women, kill them all."
It just goes to show that mothers can be anything. Mother doesn't necessarily mean compassionate. Motherhood can also mean hypervigilance. It could mean protection at all costs, even. So, we're definitely seeing iterations of that on all sides also.
I saw this change in the Israeli society, and I know that on the Palestinian society also, there are some mothers in funerals, especially in funerals of their sons, of their martyr sons. The journalist would approach them and tell them, "Say this and don't say that, do this and don't do that." And when they are within their mourning, within the shock of the loss of their beloved ones, they say things like "Kullu la Palestine," everything is for Palestine. I have other sons, and I don't know what.
Yeah, again, on all sides. Mothers can go to the issues of experiences of pain and trauma, or they could go to the places of hypervigilance and hyperprotectiveness. Some go to peace, and some go to revenge. And I think we have to acknowledge that these are all on some level iterations of motherhood.
But when she goes back home to his room, to his empty place on the table, to her life without him at all, she realizes that nothing is worth it. I worked with Doctors Without Borders, Médecins Sans Frontières in Hebron city, the old city. And I listened to mothers who lost their sons. And I listened to mothers on the Israeli side also mourning their sons. It's the same agony, the same sadness, because it comes out from the same basic instinct, which is motherhood. I saw how the Palestinian mothers sometimes talk about revenge, about it's a sacrifice for Palestine, and I don't know what. And I saw the change that I haven't seen before, the change in the Israeli society. And I'm trying to think, first of all, how to get most women, most mothers, to not to say "Ani rotsani kama" again, not to say "I want revenge for my martyr son" again. It's a very, very long. Actually, what happened lately this year did not take us only to square one. It took us to prehistory.
People are living in intense fear. Base fears are taking over. Yes. That's part of what we have to fight against. It's not easy, but that's part of the process here. Yes, base fears.
What happened actually was shocking on the existential level
Right.
of the Israelis as well as the Palestinians.
Right.
Now, every time my son goes out, every time my son wants to travel to a place, every single day, every single morning, every single night, my immediate concern, my immediate worry is that he will be present, he will be shot, he will be chased, and I'm sure it's the same on the Israeli side. Like we are using the same roads, we are going to the same destinations. On Road 60 the other day, I was very worried for my son, 22, who was driving me to Bethlehem because there was a checkpoint. And I thought there is an Israeli mother somewhere in Israel worried for her son because she knows he's at a checkpoint now, stopping Palestinians.
Fear for your children is a very big motivator here for sure. If we're talking about how motherhood impacts all this, the fear for your children definitely has an impact. And maybe the core of the work, what you're describing here, is that we have to also as mothers and also as human beings shift from internalized fear and internalized patriarchal paradigms about not only who's our enemy, but also what it means to make the world a better place, move away from militaristic paradigms, move away from fear, even within our own fears, even if in our very real concerns about our children, find the place within ourselves to see things from a place of light and a place of humanity and a place of hope and imagine something different. From within all of this pain and darkness that we're all going through right now, to bring ourselves and those around us to dwell in a different possibility, in a different paradigm and different ideas. That's the big challenge. But Lama, you give me hope. Lama, you give me hope. You give me, I am inspired. I am inspired by your activism and your ability to see, all human beings and, the work that you're doing, even from within your own places of darkness. And that gives me a lot of hope.
We'll never ever stop. Even more, I am even motivated more during wartime. Though it's not easy, like I don't even have permits. I need to go to gatherings, to women gatherings in Jerusalem, in Tel Aviv. I am not even allowed a permit. Now we should come out of the shock state. We should move to something else now. We should see where hope is, where people are willing to get together and do something and let them, and not just deny them even a permit to go to reach out to the other, and vice versa. I'm sure the Israelis are not allowed to come to Palestine also. So the challenges that we have as women in Palestinian society are many. I'm not belittling from the challenges for women on the Israeli side, but I think I would say they have more space. I would say they have more freedom.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Rachel. Thank you, Lama. It's been a very inspiring conversation, and we will continue it outside of this podcast and maybe in the next season as well.
Oh,
bringing
excellent.
really the womb peace activation, which is another movement that I would love to share with you
Oh,
about. Thank you so
what was that
much.
womb piece? Did you say womb?
Yeah, there's a whole movement around womb peace activation of bringing in how can we all came, whether as a woman or a man, we all came within a womb.
Oh.
And in the womb, we can hold two hearts
Oh.
in one body.
Oh, wow.
And I think the challenge right now is, can we hold two truths in one heart? Because there is two truths, the truth of the Israelis and the truth of the Palestinians. And how can we bring it all into one heart, just like a mother's carrying two hearts within one body?
Oh my God,
So
wow.
let's end with that.
Let's end with that. This ends our season, by the way. This is our 10th episode, the end of our season. And I feel like we're ending with a lot of inspiration, a lot of hope, and a lot of questions, and a lot still more to learn.
I would like to end it with a promise to, especially for you, Lama. I promise that we'll continue to work day and night to change it. And hopefully when we meet next time, things will be a little bit different. At least we will end this bloodshed.
God willing.
Inshallah.
Inshallah. I feel like we're ending in the middle.
You,
we're like in the middle. We're like in the middle of a zillion things. Okay.
All right.
Bye. Bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bye bye.